mean, I never thought too much about photography. Never studied photography. Didn't particularly want to be a photographer initially until I took LSD. Picked up a camera, and then I thought, whatever, it was just fun. But I was at Cambridge studying modern languages and literature, and I picked up a camera on an acid trip, and somehow that led, and then someone gave me a £5 to shoot some local band, and I thought, well, that's £5 for that, that sounds good. And then Syd Barrett and Bowie, and it kept going. That tag, when my first book went out, I think it was in '95, some journalist in England came up with a headline on an article they wrote, and somebody else picked up on it, and then another person picked. What does it mean? I don't know what it means. I didn't shoot the Carpenters, I didn't shoot Boston, I didn't shoot, what else did I didn't shoot REO Speedwagon, I didn't shoot many. However, of course, in retrospect, I shot what people saw as the cutting edge, all that glammy, punky stuff, and I was totally immersed in that. Of course, I also shot Bob Marley and Ozzy Osbourne along the way. People want to see people like Syd Barrett, and David and Lou, and Iggy and Queen and Freddie and Debbie Harry and the Ramones and the Rocky Horror. So I suppose I was the man that shot the 70s in that sense. This one here, the original image, obviously this is a piece of art that's been done from it. That was like the one on the end, because they are both from the saxophone sessions. They were taken for the Pinups package, which I art directed. Well, they're performance images, but I can see that they were both taken in 1973, which was, David sometimes calls that phase Aladdin Sane, but really it's Ziggy Stardust Mark II. I mean, he would add and subtract and play day by day. I've actually got him in that 20-month period in, I think, 72 different outfits. He was always changing, tweaking, mutating. I mean, it was fascinating to watch him. But I love them. I think they're not. There's plenty of t-shirts out there on David, but there's nothing like this. And the quality. Beautiful. Back in those days, he definitely helped, because he stood out. But no, I think David would have been a big deal if he'd gone out looking like the drabbest performer on God's earth. The fact that he looked like the most amazing person that anybody had ever seen, well, maybe that added a few thousand sales. And for David, the music was always more important. It's just that image thing, he was so good at it that it got a bit ahead of him, and then of course he used it. What David brought in was this space image thing. There was a whole other element. And then a little taste of the German and the French. I mean, he somehow, into that Ziggy Stardust thing, he introduced so many different strains. I think the image helped, but on the bottom line, the music. Listen to Ziggy Stardust, listen to Hunky Dory, listen to Aladdin Sane. I mean, they're not getting played because of the way David looks all the time. They're getting played because the music's incredible. But let me say up front, in retrospect, the music always stood up. And it doesn't matter what he'd done, he would have ended up being a huge deal. But he was always playing around with that from earlier times. I mean, it was part of his DNA to play around with the way he looks. And he had studied mime with a guy called Lindsay Kemp, who taught David all that amazing stuff, formed the foundation, stirred his interest in Noam Kabuki theatre. It was like in a way, like a mod. The principle of the mod meaning, you know, they're always changing, they were always the latest this and the latest. But David was kind of beyond the latest this or that, because he was doing his own thing out ahead of everybody. He was the master of ceremonies. Whatever he seemed to touch, happened. And it was all happening while he was creating his own career, while he was establishing himself. I don't know how he did it. He had a lot of bloody energy, I'll say that. And he was sharp, intuitive. You'd say something once to him, he'd pick up on it. And he was picking up from all over the place. I don't know where it came from. It's just the way David was. And of course it carried on and on and on and on. He could have walked around in fucking rags and he would have still looked amazing. He was just built for it and he had the right attitude. I mean, this is an extraordinarily gifted man. He taught me a fast trick because I liked to shoot. And that was always my modus operandi. 90% of the time I shot a lot of pictures when I shot. It's like the saxophone, we shot for an hour. And I had shot, I would say, at least 8 rolls. This is wind on Hasselblad, 812s, 96. So, because I shot full length, as you can see here, and that's also full length, but there's also close-ups, black and white and colour. Nowadays, bingo, I could shoot twice as many in that time, and wouldn't even have to think about black and white or colour because you just convert them. You know, it was very intuitive, instinctive. I mean, I have been very lucky in my life to have shot some amazingly photogenic subjects. And of course, finally I got to New York and got to shoot Debbie Harry. And I saw from Syd Barrett, Lou, Iggy, David, Fred especially, and Roxy Music. These people were artists. They were rock and rollers, but they were artists. And this one, him and Lou Reed were in a way the 2 cornerstones for me. And David represented London and this brighter thing, and Lou was New York and this darker thing. Him, Lou, Iggy, especially those 3, as I dubbed them years ago, the unholy trinity. There's nothing goes on today that upsets anybody to the degree that they upset people back then. And of course later the Sex Pistols especially also upset people in a different way but to the same degree. But of course the media was so different too. It's hard putting it all into context. It was a smaller batch of people. Yes, by 73, as Davis talks about, I mean, hod carrying, you know, construction workers would be walking around with the big heels and, you know, the gaudy outfits. And that was his doing, I'm afraid. He did inspire a whole generation. And of course it washed over into America. They all look pretty back, all those guys. You know, a little bit of pout here and there, a bit of this. I was right on top of it. Because that's the way you could get close to the hot babes. And then you were hip. You looked like you could swing either way. You were definitely hip. That was the order of the day. I tell you, the big difference was, back then, yesterday's music was like yesterday's newspapers. And the pictures and the albums were regarded as being very disposable. The idea of classic rock or my pictures in museums and galleries, I mean, who wanted to be in a museum? And the whole point that you were an outsider, a rebel. You were on the edge. You were in the moment.